Hello, hello, and welcome to our mini podcast series with the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce. I am your special guest today. I'm Lauren Sweeney with Rise Up For You, and I'm so thrilled to be here. We have Dawne Stafford from Security Bank in Tulsa, and of course, you all know Allison Walden here with us from the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce. And Dawne is our lead volunteer over this area, and she is our Chief Executive Officer at the bank. So we're thrilled to have you both here, and we're going to be talking about the women's programming for September 24th, and just talking about what are we going to be covering and asking a few questions along the road. But before we get started, I thought we'd open with a little bit of an icebreaker question. And since we are moving into summer, depending upon when you are watching this podcast here, any particular bucket travel location, Dawne or Allison? Let's start with the hard questions. Do we have any bucket list places we want to travel?
Well, I actually traveled to Greece in April. So I got it before the summer started. But yeah, I spent 2 weeks in Greece. It was great.
Amazing. Oh, one of the places that's on my list.
It's a bucket list, yeah.
Definitely. That sounds amazing. How about for you, Allison?
My family goes to the same beach every year on the East Coast, and it's something we absolutely look forward to. So that's our destination.
I love it. Well, this summer we are taking our kids are fifth grade and finishing seventh grade, and we're taking them for the first time to Europe. So we're going to Paris and we're going to London. So that's going to be amazing.
Great. Are you taking the channel between the two?
We are. Yes.
Great.
We are. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, we're going to be talking about a few different things that we will cover, and I'll put this banner back up later on, don't worry, but just in case you're not registered, you better run to your computer or go right there on your phone. Just go to the Tulsa Chamber website, go under events, select the 924 Women's Programming event. At the end, Allison will give you even more details about it, but make sure that you register before it sells out. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So a first question that I'd love to ask, and let's maybe kick it over to you, Dawne. As an executive, as a CEO, what do you look for with someone on your team that communicates effectively?
You know, one thing that I've learned from other people is, I've worked for people who, when they walk in the door in the morning, they go straight to their office. They're businesslike, they're busy, they're powerful, and you kind of are reserved about being around somebody like that. But I've learned and tried to model myself more off the person who stops and says hello to everybody and shakes hands with people when maybe that's the appropriate activity, but that, make everybody whose path you cross, give them a smile or a hello or something like that. And that's not just when you walk in the morning, but it's when you walk across the lobby, when you're going out the door for lunch, whatever it may be. Just, that friendliness, I think that's important. And that was a lesson I learned a long time ago. So.
Absolutely. It kind of extending yourself at Rise Up For You. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence. And so it's having your own self-awareness and getting outside of your box so that you can have social awareness. And that does take sometimes extra effort, especially if we never know what people are dealing with. So they might have come into the office and had something happen at home or on the freeway while they're traveling. If they come in, most of your employees, I'm sure, are not remote. So,
right.
We're a whole person, but being able to have that awareness organizationally to see what's needed and extend ourselves makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, amazing. Question for you. In banking and leadership, communication can definitely directly impact culture and trust. How have you kind of seen that play out inside of your career?
Well, we actually talk about culture a lot at Security Bank. We're a small organization in a competitive market here in Tulsa. And so, it's really important that our employees, as well as our customers, feel like that we're developing a relationship, I think. So, that's what I think culture is kind of about for us, is that through communication or just, your business dealings with people, that you feel like it's a partnership. It's really developing a relationship. That's kind of what I feel like our culture tries to be.
Absolutely. I'm sure then that positively impacts your clients, the customers, but also your team, employee engagement. At Rise Up For You, we have a lot of corporate clients, and we always talk about, like, what's your turnover like? What's your engagement like? And all of these things go in and impact it for sure, both internally and then externally.
Well, we actually have a really good track history of longevity with our employees. And so we're proud of that. It can be a problem. I had somebody come to me once and need an additional person in their area, and it was because everybody there has such long vacations built up that there's always somebody absent. And I was like, so the good news is people stay a long time. The bad news is they have a lot of benefits because of that. So we needed to add staff to cover that.
Absolutely. Allison, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. You, as a business leader at the chamber, you work with all different kinds of organizations, and I'm sure you see a lot about leadership and communication.
Yeah, I would just say that I've had the benefit of growing at the chamber from very early in my career to more of a midpoint in my career. And I remember what it's like to be a younger, less experienced employee working to communicate upward or upward across, and how intimidating and challenging that can be. So from my perspective, my goal is to try to make a safe place for people to come in, make sure that I'm approachable, and make sure that it's okay if people ask for help or need more resources. And I always try to ask a lot of really good clarifying questions to make sure people understand and make sure that they know it's okay if they don't have it all figured out. So I'm hopeful that that's the approach that comes across, because it's something that's very important to me.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to values alignment. You probably both agree. Like, if we have a set of values that we're operating inside of personally, and hopefully they align with our organizations, it's easier then to have that level of transparency and to be able to show up in a way that makes sense. And at the event in September, we're going to talk about that. Like, how do you have that level of influential communication? It really does start with like our level of self-awareness. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, let's tackle the next question that's come in. What advice would either of you give emerging leaders who want to communicate with more presence and influence, but they struggle with where to start?
Well, I think that they need to try to know their facts, before they be well prepared themselves so that they can answer questions or guide people better. Also, I think, be open to some humor, be sure to smile, make it light sometimes. Um, like you said, kind of an open door policy so that you're always approachable. I think that's, the best way. Somebody can be really good and do the best job, but if they don't have good communication skills, that's going to, have an impact on their career path, I think. So, you want everybody to encourage input from others, be a listener as well as a talker,
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Anything to add there,
Yeah,
Allison? Yeah.
Yeah, I would add that I think you really hit on it in your transition, is that knowing yourself is really important. I remember early in my career, I really didn't know what I valued and know what my priorities were, because I mirrored the priorities of my supervisor in order to be the most impressive and the most useful and the most valuable. But what I found as I grew in my career is that I really needed to define my own leadership style. And that could only happen through really understanding what I valued and experience along the way. So I would say that it also just is something that happens over time, and you can't always rush it. So just enjoy the journey and the kind of discovery of who you are and how you want to show up in the world.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. One thing I think that it's helped me, we do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and often, I mean, I would say we actually do it with emerging leaders all the way up to executive teams that maybe struggle with that executive presence. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, not just thinking about myself. If I'm really worried about myself and how I'm going to come off, I'm of course more nervous. I'm of course less likely to shake hands at a networking event. We are here at the end of the the chamber, right? I'm nervous to speak up in a boardroom. And there's this great story where one of my coaching clients at Rise Up For You, she was invited to a meeting, but she wasn't an executive yet. She was like right underneath one of the executives. And she was invited to this meeting, but had some imposter syndrome about being in the meeting. And so she put her chair kind of outside the boardroom, circle. And she was in the room, but just, behind the main executives at the table. And at the end of the meeting, her CEO came up to her and said, "You were invited to this meeting, right?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I wouldn't have been in the room if I wasn't." She kind of thought she was in trouble. And the CEO said, "You were invited to this meeting. You get a seat at the table. Don't ever sit behind all of us next time. Sit here at the table." And it just stuck with me, obviously the caring of her executive, but also just to remember that we all have a level of perhaps not feeling good enough or having some negative thought process, an ant, we call it, automatic negative thought. And yet we're in a room, even if we don't have a title at all. I know we mentioned emerging leaders, but sometimes we don't even have a title of a leader yet. And yet I'm sure, Dawne, you see this, and Allison as well, that you notice people who have presence, who have energy. It doesn't really matter necessarily what their title is.
Absolutely. I get a lot out of monthly staff meetings that we have. I usually have a little bit of agenda, PowerPoint, kind of talk about financial situations, maybe upcoming events, things like that are going to impact people. But I always try to pause and see if anybody has any questions or concerns that they want to add to it. And lots of times I just look around the circle and have to blank faces, no doubt about it. But most of the people over time have now they expect to come prepared themselves. And so they know they might be called on to share what's going on in their area and stuff like that. And so I hope that encourages the younger generation to know that they do have a seat at the table. That is why they were at that meeting, and they do have a contribution to make. So, I want them to do that. And, they might have the next best great idea. And so you don't want to miss out on that. So.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. It makes them feel included, important, and valued, which goes back to your intentional culture that you have at the bank as well. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. That was a good one. All right. Let's see what else we had here. So my next question is, what role do you think that listening and empathy play in influential communication from your perspectives?
Well, communication is a two-way street, so it has to be about listening. I'm old enough to have had many phases in my career too, so I know what it was like to be a younger professional trying to be heard. I know what it's like to be a mom and show up at 8:35 because I was getting my kids to the bus. Had to leave for a dentist appointment, things like that, and then move into the next phase of your life where you have different things going on. So really try to relate to everybody because, we're all taking different paths, but very likely we have a lot of commonality through our lives. It's just maybe different stages of our lives. So, I'm kind of getting off track here a little bit, but, engaging in those conversations and listening to somebody's story about what's going on in their life, not just ideas they bring to a meeting. I think, that just creates that culture, I think, creates that comfort with everybody. Also tells them that, we respect them and have high regard for their opinions.
Absolutely. Definitely. I like to say it's empathy and expectations. It's not that like we're so empathetic that, if you've called out 29 times, we just go, oh, it's okay. But we have an expectation in our organizations and we have a level of awareness of others. So we're not just staying kind of in our own little bubbles, but where am I, and paying attention to where are you? Where is the other person in the room? Yeah.
Well, I think as a woman, we juggle a lot, we balance a lot. And so I hope that people will look and say, well, she's not any less busy than me. She doesn't have any less on her plate than me. And so, we can work together and make this happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. It goes back to our level of trust too, and vulnerability as a leader, which can be difficult at times. So if we increase that self-awareness, that can help us as well with our ability to show up and have presence. Allison, did you want to add anything to to our empathy and listening?
Yeah, I completely agree with you that empathy is one part of the triangle, if you will, and the other things you mentioned are accountability and empowerment. So I think those are three, things in balance that can really create a great relationship, but one can't outweigh the other. But I will say, when you look back at your career at a place, my challenge is that likely employees won't remember all the projects and the big wins. They might actually more remember the times where you had their back or they failed and you helped them recover and move forward. Those are the things that people are going to remember.
Yeah,
Good point.
100%. So true. All right. Well, we had so many good questions come in about this topic, but I think that as a final question, what is one communication skill you believe leaders will need even more of in the future?
Well, I think it is the challenge of digital communications.
Mm.
Um, you know, the ability to connect with people via Teams or Zoom or maybe even FaceTime allows the immediacy of the situation. You don't have to wait till you have a meeting that you put on the calendar type of thing. But I think people could stand to work on doing that in a more professional and a more courteous way. If I'm on a meeting with somebody and two or three people on the screen have their camera turned off, what that tells me is they're really not listening and they're really not participating in the conversation. I'm not a big fan of texting for really more than just those sentences back and forth to connect people, but I don't think you should have a business conversation necessarily via text. So, I do think that's a challenge for people to figure out how to embrace where we're going. This is the way it is in the world right now. So, it's not going to get less digital communication, but I'd like to see it become a little more professional.
Absolutely. So many nuances in digital communication and being able to pick up on people's nonverbals, which is very hard, as you exactly, Dawne, to your point. When we text, if I text, I try to voice memo if possible, so that at least you can hear the vocal intonations and tone. Yesterday, I was asked to give somebody feedback, and I actually made them a video because then they could see my facial expressions, they could hear my voice, they could see my warmth in being able to deliver that type of feedback. It actually, ironically, or maybe not, was on influential communication. And so their posture and their poise and everything like that. And hopefully it was better received then when I got on for their coaching call. It made it so much better. We already had some level of rapport versus giving that feedback in just an email where you can't pick up on any tone at all. And often we catastrophize or, make up a tone that wasn't intended.
Now, it sounds like you are on that topic for sure.
I think so. I was thinking about today's podcast and influential communication. Yeah, very good. Allison, were you going to add anything?
Yeah, I think number one, that's a really creative tactic. I think I might test that out and see how that goes. But on the continuum of technology and interpersonal, I'll just kind of go to the opposite side of what Dawne mentioned is that with that increasing technology, I think we also need to be as human and authentic as possible. And so when we have interactions with people, they need to be vulnerable, they need to be real, they need to be authentic. I think people really want to be let in, and kind of the days of, extra secrecy under the guise of professionalism or under the guise of, hierarchy sometimes doesn't resonate well, especially with some of our younger employees. They really need to understand why and how they can contribute meaningfully. And so I think if we're just open to that, as well as open to how to use our technology tools in a ways that connects instead of separates, I think those are all just things that we have a responsibility to figure out, and it's not always easy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we could go on for a couple hours and we won't, because this is really a teaser. So if you're watching or listening to this mini podcast episode, we really want to encourage you to register. Hopefully you've been coming to the women's events that the Chamber's been putting on this year. They've been fantastic. They do sell out. We are going to have a light reception the night before. As the speaker, I will be at both, obviously the main event and the night before. I will tell you that I will have handouts handouts. I will have slides. Like, it's going to be a very interactive, energizing, and strategic session on influential communication. Here at Rise Up For You, we have 4 main pillars, and each of them has a book that goes with it. So self-confidence is our first one, then emotional intelligence. Our third one's transformational leadership, but you all are advanced. So you're getting the 4th pillar, which is influential communication. Allison, do you want to give them some details? I mean, we already said where to register. Just go here to the Chamber website, go to events, run, or just open it on your phone right now. But do you want to give them more details about the event?
Thank you so much, Lauren. I am so thrilled that you said that we are going to get the advanced material, because I know that you and I met several years ago at a conference. And when we started talking about what it might look like for you to do something with our chamber in Tulsa, we had that very conversation about how sophisticated and leaned in our business community is, and certainly our women business leaders. So we're so thrilled that you're going to be bringing your A game to Tulsa, to the Mayo Hotel, fabulous space in the ballroom for about 340 people on September 24th. So Lauren is 100% correct. It is going to sell out. We have been overwhelmed with the response. So please come, and please know that at that event, we will also have a feedback loop for the formation of next year's programming. So we want you involved. We want your feedback. We want your collaboration, and we can't wait for September 24th.
Amazing. It's going to be incredible. We cannot wait to see you there. This has been a fantastic episode. Thank you, Dawne. Thank you, Allison, for joining us today. I'm going to sign us out, and we will see you all at the September 24th event.
Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
Bye.